Story number 1. Shadows of the Lone Pine Forest. I've always been captivated by the allure of the unknown, the silent whispers of nature that speak volumes to those willing to listen. So, when my friends and I decided to embark on a camping trip to Lone Pine Forest in Texas during the winter of 2018, felt like the perfect adventure. We were a tight-knit group of college friends, Jake, Emma, Liam, and me, seeking respite from the chaos of exams and the monotony of daily life. Little did we know, our journey would plunge us into a nightmarish encounter that would forever alter our perception of the wilderness. Lone Pine Forest was infamous among locals for its dense thickets and the legends that surrounded it. Stories of mysterious creatures and unexplained phenomena were common, but we dismissed them as mere folklore, relics of a bygone era. Armed with our camping gear, a hearty supply of food, and an insatiable curiosity, we set out early December, eager to embrace the serenity and beauty that the forest promised. The drive to the forest was uneventful, the landscape transforming from urban sprawl to the rugged, snow-blanketed wilderness that Lone Pine was known for. By late afternoon, we arrived at the designated campsite, a small clearing surrounded by towering pine trees that stood like silent sentinels against the winter sky. The air was crisp, each breath a visible puff that mingled with the falling snowflakes. We quickly set up our tents. The rhythmic snap of poles and the soft thud of bags hitting the ground creating a comforting cadence amidst the quietude. As dusk settled, we gathered around the campfire, the flames flickering and casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on our minds. Emma unpacked her guitar, the soothing melodies blending with the crackling of the fire and the distant howl of the wind through the trees. We shared stories and laughed, the warmth of the flames a stark contrast to the biting cold that enveloped us. The first night passed peacefully, the only interruptions the occasional rustle of wildlife and the gentle whisper of the wind. But as midnight approached, an unsettling tension began to seep into the atmosphere. The temperature plummeted further, the fire's warmth now a thin barrier against the encroaching chill. That's when we heard it, a faint, rhythmic scratching sound emanating from the edge of the clearing. At first, we dismissed it as a branch scraping against a tent or an animal searching for shelter. But the sound grew louder, more deliberate, sending shivers down our spines. Jake, always the skeptic, grabbed his flashlight and cautiously approached the source of the noise. "Probably just a raccoon or something," he muttered, trying to mask the unease in his voice. But as he shone the light into the darkness, we all froze. Standing there was a massive creature, unlike any animal we had ever seen. It resembled a wolf, but it stood upright on two legs, its fur thick and black, absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. Its eyes burned a fierce red, piercing through the darkness with an intensity that made my blood run cold. Before Jake could react, the creature let out a guttural growl, a sound that resonated deep within the forest. Took a step forward, his heavy paws sinking slightly into the fresh snow, and we watched in horror as it began to advance towards us. Panic surged through our veins, and without thinking, we bolted towards our tents, the adrenaline fueling our desperate escape. "Let's get to the car," Emma shouted, her voice trembling with fear as we sprinted through the snow-covered clearing. The creature followed, its howls echoing through the trees like a chorus of anguish and rage. We reached the edge of the clearing and dove into our vehicle, slamming the doors shut just as the creature reached us. My heart pounded in my chest as I fumbled with the keys, trying to start the engine. The howling continued outside, relentless and terrifying, as if the creature was determined to reclaim what it perceived as its territory. With trembling hands, I turned the key, and the engine roared to life, the headlights cutting through the darkness as we sped away from the campsite. Glancing in the rearview mirror, we saw the creature standing at the edge of the forest, its red eyes watching us with an unholy intensity. For a moment, we thought it was still pursuing us, but it remained motionless, staring until we were safely out of sight. The drive back to civilization was a blur of fear and disbelief. We were silent, the reality of what we had witnessed sinking in with each passing mile. The forest loomed in the distance, its shadows seemingly alive with the memory of that terrifying encounter. When we finally arrived at the nearest town, we piled out of the car, our breaths visible in the cold night air, and vowed never to return to Lone Pine Forest. The next morning, curiosity got the better of us, and we decided to investigate the aftermath of our ordeal. We returned to the campsite, the snow now glistening under the weak winter sun. As we approached, we noticed something horrifying. Deep scratch marks gouged into the door of our vehicle and the walls of our tents, evidence of the creature's relentless assault. The remnants of our disturbed campsite lay scattered, the snow marred by the trail of destruction we had narrowly escaped. Determined to understand what we had encountered, we reached out to local authorities and wildlife experts, but no one could provide a satisfactory explanation. The creature defied classification, its existence dismissed by many as a figment of our collective imagination fueled by fear and the isolation of the wilderness. But the scratch marks and the lingering sense of dread left no room for doubt. Something truly sinister roamed the depths of Lone Pine Forest. In the days that followed, rumors began to circulate among the locals, tales of a mythical beast that guarded the forest with a vengeance. Some believed it was a spirit, a remnant of ancient legends that came to life, while others thought it was a cryptid, a creature born from the darkest corners of the wilderness. The stories were dismissed by most, but those who had ventured into Lone Pine knew better. The forest held secrets that were best left undisturbed, its shadows hiding dangers beyond human comprehension. Haunted by our encounter, we found ourselves plagued by nightmares and a constant sense of being watched. The experience had left an indelible mark on us, a lingering fear that refused to fade. We couldn't shake the feeling that the creature was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for another opportunity to strike. Determined to put the nightmare behind us, we tried to move on, but the memories of that night continued to haunt us. Emma avoided the woods altogether. Jake became more reclusive, and Liam and I found solace in the familiarity of city life. But every winter, when the snow began to fall and the nights grew long, the fear resurfaced, a chilling reminder of the shadows that once consumed us. Years have passed since that fateful winter, but the memory of Lone Pine Forest remains vivid in my mind. Sometimes, when the wind howls just right and the snow blankets the landscape in a serene white, I catch a glimpse of something moving in the distance, a silhouette against the moonlight, its red eyes burning with a silent rage. The whispers of that night echo in my thoughts, a constant reminder that some places hold darkness too deep to uncover, and that the wilderness can harbor horrors beyond imagination. We never returned to Lone Pine Forest, the trauma too great to bear, but the lessons we learned that night linger on, etched into our souls like the scratch marks on our vehicle. Respect the wilderness, honor its secrets, and understand that some legends are born from truths too terrifying to confront. The shadows of Lone Pine continue to watch, a silent guardian of the forest's dark legacy, ensuring that its mysteries remain forever hidden beneath the snow-covered pines. Story number 2. Whispers in the Winter Lodge. I've always believed that escaping the relentless pace of city life required more than just a change of scenery. It demanded a complete immersion into nature's embrace, a retreat where the silence was profound and the nights were dominated by the untamed wilderness. In the winter of 2015, my wife, Sarah, and I decided to take that plunge, booking a stay at a secluded lodge on the outskirts of Ontario, Canada. Little did we know, our quest for tranquility would lead us into the heart of a nightmare we couldn't have imagined. The lodge, aptly named Frostwood Retreat, was nestled deep within a dense forest, its rustic charm promising an idyllic winter getaway. Snow blanketed the ground in a pristine white, transforming the landscape into a serene, almost otherworldly tableau. As we arrived on a crisp December afternoon, the air was sharp with the scent of pine and the promise of a peaceful retreat. The lodge stood proudly against the horizon, smoke curling lazily from its chimney, welcoming us into its warm, wooden interior. Our first evening was everything we had hoped for. We settled into the cozy living room, the roaring fireplace casting a comforting glow that danced across the room's antique furnishings. Sarah brewed a pot of hot cocoa, the rich aroma mingling with the scent of burning wood. We spent hours talking, reminiscing about old times, and planning our days of skiing and exploring the surrounding woods. The tranquility was palpable, the kind that only a secluded winter lodge could offer. As midnight approached, the lodge settled into a deep, peaceful silence. The only sounds were the crackling of the fire and the occasional gust of wind rustling through the trees outside. Sarah and I retreated to our room, the warmth of the blankets a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. Exhausted from the day's activities, we drifted into a restful sleep, the serenity of frostwood retreat lulling us into dreams. But our peaceful night was abruptly shattered. I was jolted awake by a loud, persistent scratching sound coming from the window. My heart raced as I sat up, the remnants of sleep clouding my vision. The noise was unlike anything I had heard before, sharp, frantic, and relentless. I nudged Sarah, whispering, "Did you hear that?" She stirred, her eyes wide with concern. "Yeah, what is it?" I grabbed my flashlight from the bedside table and cautiously approached the window, the cold air prickling my skin as I pulled back the curtains. At first, all I could see was the swirling snow outside, the flakes dancing in the harsh light of the moon. But then, through the blur of white, I caught a glimpse of something, or someone, standing on the other side, a large, hulking figure, its form resembling a werewolf but standing upright like a human, stared back at me. Its fur was thick and black, absorbing the moonlight, while its eyes burned a fierce, unnatural red. I froze, the creature's gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "Stay calm," I whispered to Sarah, who was now sitting up beside me. "It's probably just an animal." But the creature didn't move. Instead, it began to advance slowly, its heavy footsteps crunching against the snow-covered ground. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread as it approached the window, its red eyes never leaving mine. Before I could react, it let out a guttural growl that echoed through the silent night, sending a wave of fear crashing over me. Without thinking, I slammed the window shut and locked the door, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the latch. The scratching intensified, now accompanied by the sound of the creature's heavy breathing just outside the glass. Sarah grabbed my arm, her face pale with fear. "We need to get out of here," she whispered urgently. But the storm outside was fierce, the wind howling like the cries of the damned. The snow was falling so heavily that visibility was near zero, making the idea of leaving the lodge seem impossible. We huddled together, the warmth of the fireplace the only barrier between us and the terror outside. Hours passed in tense silence, the scratching sounds ebbing and flowing like the tide. Every so often, the creature would pause, its eyes burning into us through the glass, before resuming its relentless assault on the window. Sleep was a distant memory as fear kept us awake, the night stretching on interminably. When dawn finally broke, the storm had subsided, leaving behind a landscape transformed by the night's fury. Exhausted and still shaken, we approached the window to assess the damage. To our horror, we found deep scratch marks etched into the glass and the walls, evidence of the creature's relentless assault. The once pristine window was marred by long, jagged gouges, the snow around it disturbed by the heavy presence that had prowled outside. Determined to understand what had happened, we reached out to the local authorities. They were skeptical at first, dismissing our account as a vivid nightmare or the result of overactive imaginations fueled by the isolation of the lodge. But when they inspected the window, the scratch marks and signs of a large creature were undeniable. No logical explanation could account for the severity and precision of the damage. In the days that followed, rumors began to circulate among the staff and other guests at Frostwood Retreat. Tales of a mysterious, Malevolent presence in the woods spread like wildfire, each account adding to the growing unease that hung over the lodge. Some spoke of ancient curses tied to the land, others of restless spirits seeking vengeance for forgotten wrongs. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved into the history of Frostwood Retreat and the surrounding area. What I discovered was a tapestry of tragedy and loss, woven into the very fabric of the land. Decades ago, during the early 1900s, the area had been the site of a brutal conflict, an unsolved massacre where innocent lives were lost amidst the unforgiving winter. The spirits of those who perished were believed to linger, their anguish and rage binding them to the land in an eternal state of unrest. The creature we had encountered was no ordinary beast. It was a manifestation of the tortured souls bound to the forest, a guardian turned malevolent by centuries of pain and betrayal. The legends spoke of its relentless hunt for justice, its presence a chilling reminder of the past that refused to stay buried. Armed with this knowledge, I knew we couldn't remain at Frostwood Retreat any longer. The fear that had gripped us that night was a manifestation of the same darkness that had plagued the land for generations. With a heavy heart, I packed our belongings, the reality of our situation sinking in as we prepared to leave the only home we had known. As we drove away from the lodge, the sun rising over the snow-covered horizon seemed to offer a glimmer of hope. But the memory of those red eyes and the relentless scratching would forever haunt me, a testament to the thin veil that separates the living from the dead and the enduring power of unresolved sorrow. Years have passed since that harrowing Christmas night, but the scars remain. Sometimes, when the winter winds howl just right and the snow begins to fall, I find myself staring into the darkness, wondering if the spirits of Frostwood Retreat still watch over their sacred ground, forever bound by the shadows of their past. The whispers of that night echo in my mind, a chilling reminder that some places hold secrets too dark to uncover and that the past, no matter how deeply buried, can reach out and touch the present in ways we can scarcely comprehend. Story number 3. Shadows in the Pine Woods. I've always been drawn to the wilderness, the untamed beauty of Maine's pine-covered forests offering a sanctuary from the relentless pace of modern life. As a seasoned hunter, I thrived on the solitude and the primal connection with nature that only the deep woods could provide. But nothing could have prepared me for the night in December 2010 that would forever change my perception of the wilderness and the shadows that lurk within. It was a bitterly cold evening, the kind where the wind bites through layers of clothing and the snow blankets the world in an oppressive silence. I had been tracking a herd of deer for days, the crisp winter air sharpening my senses as I moved stealthily through the dense underbrush. The trail had grown cold, the animals having retreated to deeper parts of the forest as the days shortened and the nights lengthened. As dusk began to settle, I decided to call it a day and set up camp near a frozen stream. The anticipation of a warm fire and a hearty meal was a comforting thought as I unpacked my gear. The forest around me was alive with the sounds of winter, cracking branches, the distant call of an owl, and the soft crunch of snow underfoot. I lit a fire, the flames casting dancing shadows on the snow-covered ground, creating an eerie interplay of light and darkness. Hours passed in peaceful solitude, the only interruptions the occasional rustle of wildlife and the steady crackle of the fire. But as midnight approached, an unsettling stillness enveloped the forest, a silence so profound it felt almost unnatural. That's when I heard it, a faint, rhythmic scratching coming from the edge of the clearing. At first, I dismissed it as a branch scraping against the tent or an animal searching for shelter. But the sound grew louder, more deliberate, sending a chill down my spine. I grabbed my flashlight and cautiously approached the source of the noise, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. The snow had thickened overnight, creating a pristine but treacherous landscape. As I neared the treeline, the scratching intensified, accompanied by low, guttural growls that resonated through the cold night air. My heart pounded in my chest as adrenaline surged through my veins, every instinct telling me to flee. And then I saw it, a massive figure standing motionless in the snow, its form partially obscured by the swirling snowflakes. It was unlike any animal I had ever encountered. Towering on two legs with a hulking, muscular frame covered in thick, black fur. His head was unmistakably canine, with sharp fangs and eyes that burned like embers in the darkness. The creature stood upright, exuding a presence that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. Frozen in fear, I watched as it slowly turned to face me, its glowing red eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my blood run cold. The air around us seemed to grow colder, the temperature dropping abruptly as if the very essence of winter had concentrated in that single, horrifying moment. I could feel the weight of its gaze, a silent challenge that urged me to react. Without warning, it let out a bone-chilling howl, a sound that echoed through the forest like the cries of the damned. The creature began to move towards me, its powerful strides leaving deep impressions in the fresh snow. Panic surged within me, and instinctively, I reached for my hunting rifle, the cold metal slipping against my numb fingers. "Stay calm, Tom," I muttered to myself, trying to steady my trembling hands. The creature was now mere meters away, its presence overwhelming. As it drew closer, I could see the intricate details of its form, the rippling muscles, the coarse fur, and those eyes that seemed to hold centuries of sorrow and rage. In a desperate attempt to protect myself, I fired a shot, the rifle's report breaking the night silence. The bullet struck true, embedding itself in the creature's shoulder. But to my horror, it barely seemed to faze it. The Dogman let out another howl, a sound of pure agony and fury, before launching itself at me with terrifying speed. I fired again, each shot echoing my frantic heartbeat. But the creature remained unfazed, its movements almost ethereal as it dodged and weaved through the snow. Fear clawed at my mind, the primal instinct to survive overriding any rational thought. I turned and ran, my legs pumping as I sprinted through the forest, the howls of the Dogman chasing me like a relentless nightmare. Branches whipped against my face, the snow stinging my eyes, but I didn't dare look back. The path I had taken seemed unfamiliar, the once familiar terrain now a labyrinth of shadows and frozen memories. My breath came in ragged gasps, each step a battle against the exhaustion and the icy grip of fear that held me tight. In the chaos of my flight, I stumbled and fell, the cold seeping into my bones as I struggled to get back on my feet. The Dogman loomed over me, its red eyes burning with an otherworldly intensity. I could feel its presence pressing in, the air thick with an unspoken sorrow and a hunger that was beyond mere survival. Summoning every ounce of courage, I reached for the rifle, ready to fight for my life. But as I looked into its eyes, something shifted within me, a deep sense of understanding and a sorrow that mirrored its own. The Dogman hesitated, its stance faltering as if torn between rage and something more profound. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the howling wind. The creature didn't respond, its form beginning to waver like smoke in the night air. Slowly, it began to back away, its eyes never leaving mine, until it faded into the shadows of the forest, leaving me alone in the silent, snow-covered wilderness. Breathing heavily, I lay on the cold ground, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away, leaving behind a lingering sense of unease. I realized that this encounter was more than a mere confrontation with a wild animal. It was a meeting with a tormented soul, a guardian of the forest bound by sorrow and rage. The next morning, I awoke to find the snow untouched by the night's chaos, the forest calm and serene as if nothing had happened. Shaken and bruised, I packed up my gear and made my way back to civilization, the memory of the Dogman etched into my mind like a permanent scar. The experience left me with more questions than answers, the legends of Maine's haunted forests now a stark reality I couldn't deny. I shared my story with locals, hoping to find some semblance of understanding or an explanation for what I had witnessed. Most dismissed it as a combination of stress, fear, and the harshness of the wilderness, but a few nodded knowingly, their eyes reflecting the same fear and respect I felt for the untamed land. Years have passed since that fateful night, but the memory of the Dogman remains vivid in my mind. Sometimes, when the wind howls just right and the snow begins to fall, I catch a glimpse of something moving in the shadows, a reminder that some spirits never find peace and that the wilderness holds secrets best left undisturbed. The encounter taught me a profound respect for the land and the unseen forces that dwell within. A lesson that continues to resonate every time I find myself drawn back to the haunting beauty of Maine's pine woods. Story number 4. Shadows over Cedar Creek Farm. I've always believed that isolation breeds introspection. Living on Cedar Creek Farm in the heart of Wisconsin's rural expanse should have been the perfect retreat from the chaos of city life. My wife, Laura, and our 2 children, Ethan and Lily, found solace in the vast fields and the rhythmic sounds of nature. Little did we know, Cedar Creek held secrets darker than the winter nights we so cherished. It was November 2003, a month when autumn's vibrant hues had surrendered to the harsh grip of impending winter. The leaves had long fallen, and the trees stood bare, their skeletal branches etched against the gray sky. The farm was quiet, the silence only broken by the occasional rustle of wind through the cornfields and the distant call of an owl. We had settled into a comfortable routine, the children thriving in their new environment, their laughter echoing through the house during the day. But as the nights grew longer and colder, an unsettling tension began to weave its way into our lives. It started with subtle noises, soft thuds against the barn, faint scratching sounds coming from the attic. Laura dismissed them as the house settling or nocturnal animals seeking refuge from the cold. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. One particularly frigid evening, as the wind howled outside and snow began to blanket the landscape, the unsettling sounds intensified. The children were tucked safely in their beds, lulled by the warmth of their blankets. But Laura and I were wide awake, the eerie noises keeping us on edge. It was around midnight when the disturbances reached a terrifying crescendo. A loud crash echoed through the house, followed by the unmistakable sound of something large moving outside. My heart pounded as I glanced at Laura, her eyes reflecting the same fear that gripped me. "I'm going to check it out," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Laura nodded, clutching Ethan's hand tightly. "Be careful, Alex." I grabbed a flashlight and headed toward the back door, the beam cutting through the darkness as I stepped into the bitter cold. The snow crunched under my boots, the wind biting at my face as I made my way to the barn. As I approached, I froze. Standing in the middle of our expansive yard was a creature unlike anything I had ever seen. It stood on 2 legs, towering over me at nearly 7 feet tall, its body covered in thick, matted fur. The head resembled that of a wolf, with piercing red eyes that seemed to glow in the moonlight and a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth. Before I could react, the creature let out a guttural growl, its eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. Took a step forward, the ground beneath its weight trembling slightly, before turning and disappearing into the dense forest that bordered our property. Heart racing, I stumbled back toward the house. The image of the creature burned into my mind. Laura rushed to my side, her face pale with fear. What was that? I could only shake my head, unable to find words to describe the horror I had just witnessed. The storm outside had intensified, the wind howling like the anguished cries of lost souls. We hurried back into the warmth of our home, the children oblivious to the terror unfolding outside. The next morning, the farm was covered in a thick layer of snow, the night storm having transformed the landscape into a winter wonderland. But beneath the serene exterior, a sense of dread lingered. We found deep, large paw prints leading from the edge of our property into the forest, evidence of the creature's presence. Determined to understand what we had encountered, I reached out to the local authorities and wildlife experts, but no one could provide an explanation. The creature defied classification, its existence dismissed by many as a figment of my imagination or a trick of the light. But the torn animal carcasses we discovered around the farm told a different story, victims of a predator with an insatiable hunger. As days turned into weeks, the disturbances continued. The noises grew more frequent and aggressive, violent thuds, desperate scratching, and the unmistakable sound of heavy breathing outside our windows. The children grew increasingly frightened, their innocent fear mirroring the turmoil within our home. Laura and I became consumed by the mystery, our lives revolving around the hunt for answers and the protection of our family. One night, as I lay awake, the whispers of the forest seemed to seep into my dreams. Visions of the creature stalking the woods, its red eyes burning with an unholy fire. I awoke with a start, the room cold and silent, but the sense of being watched was undeniable. I reached for my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness, and glanced out the window. There it was again, a hulking figure standing at the edge of the trees, its eyes gleaming ominously. This time, it didn't retreat. Instead, it watched us with a sinister patience, its presence a constant reminder of the lurking danger. Desperation led us to uncover the farm's history, delving into old records and speaking with longtime residents of the area. We discovered that our land had once been part of a vast expanse of untouched wilderness, a sacred area for the local indigenous tribes who believed the forest was inhabited by spirits and guardians. According to legend, a tragic event had occurred decades ago, an ambush during a harsh winter that left many dead, their spirits forever bound to protect the land they had lost. The creature we had encountered was believed to be a manifestation of these restless spirits, a guardian turned malevolent protector driven by sorrow and rage. The legends warned of its presence, cautioning against trespassing and disrespecting the sanctity of the land. Ignoring these warnings had unleashed a darkness that now threatened our very existence. Armed with this knowledge, we sought the help of Father Michael, a local priest familiar with the region's folklore and spiritual practices. He listened intently to our story, his expression grave as he recounted the ancient rites meant to honor the spirits and seek their forgiveness. "We must perform a cleansing ceremony," Father Michael instructed, his voice steady despite the fear evident in his eyes. "It is the only way to appease the spirits and lift the curse that binds them to this land." Under his guidance, we gathered the necessary materials, sage, salt, and offerings of food and symbolic items meant to show our respect and remorse. The night of the ceremony was cold and still, the air thick with anticipation and fear. We stood at the edge of the forest, the snow shimmering under the pale moonlight, as Father Michael began the chants, his voice rising above the howling wind. As the ceremony progressed, the atmosphere shifted, the oppressive cold seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. The whispers of the forest softened, their sorrowful tones giving way to a harmonious stillness. Slowly, the creatures of the night, once symbols of fear and danger, seemed to withdraw, their presence fading into the shadows. Suddenly, the ground beneath us trembled, the trees rustling as if in acknowledgement of our efforts. The air grew warmer, the snowflakes dancing gently around us, no longer a force of destruction but a reminder of renewal and hope. The creature that had haunted us for so long appeared one final time. Its red eyes softened, the rage and sorrow replaced by a serene calm. "You have honored us," it seemed to say, its form becoming more ethereal, blending seamlessly with the forest. "Peace has been found." With those final words, the creature vanished, the forest embracing us with a newfound tranquility. The curse was lifted, and Cedar Creek Farm was free from the shadows that had plagued us for so long. The nights grew peaceful once more, the sounds of the wilderness a comforting backdrop to our lives. We left Cedar Creek with a profound respect for the land and the spirits that guarded it. The experience had changed us, deepening our connection to the natural world and the unseen forces that dwell within it. The lessons we learned about respect, remembrance, and the delicate balance between humanity and nature stayed with us, a constant reminder of the darkness that can lie just beyond the surface of tranquility. Years have passed since that harrowing winter, but the memory of Cedar Creek Farm remains vivid in my mind. Sometimes, when the wind whispers through the trees and the snow begins to fall, I feel a lingering presence, a gentle reminder of the spirits we honored and the peace we fought to restore. The shadows over Cedar Creek have lifted, but the echoes of that night continue to whisper through my soul, a testament to the enduring power of respect and the unseen forces that shape our world. Story number 5. Howling Shadows. I've always been a night owl, finding solace in the quiet hum of the highway and the endless expanse of dark skies that stretch beyond the windshield. Driving a truck across Michigan's rural backroads in the late 1980s was my way of escaping the chaos of city life. A solitary journey through landscapes that whispered secrets in the dead of night. But on December 15th, 1987, my solitary ride turned into a nightmare that still haunts my dreams. It was a bitterly cold December night, the kind where the wind slices through layers of clothing and the snow falls in relentless sheets, blanketing everything in a suffocating white silence. I was hauling a load of lumber from Detroit to a construction site in the Upper Peninsula, the miles stretching out before me like an endless, frozen desert. The road was deserted, the only signs of life the occasional flicker of headlights disappearing into the darkness and the distant howl of the wind through the trees. As midnight approached, I felt the familiar fatigue settling into my bones. My eyes drooped, the hum of the engine lulling me towards sleep. I decided to take a short break, pulling over to the side of the road near a dense patch of forest. The trees stood tall and ominous, their bare branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. I grabbed a thermos of coffee and stepped out into the frigid air. The crunch of snow under my boots the only sound in the vast, empty landscape. The cabin where I stopped was a relic of bygone days, its wooden structure weathered by time and the harsh Alaskan winters. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, a sign of life, but I didn't linger long. Knowing that rest was a luxury I couldn't afford, I stretched my legs, the cold biting through my jacket, and decided to check the engine one last time before heading back out into the night. As I crouched beside the truck, the wind picked up, howling through the trees with an almost sentient rage. The howling grew louder, more insistent, a chorus of voices that seemed to call out from the depths of the forest. I shook off the unease, attributing the sounds to the storm brewing overhead. But then, amidst the cacophony, I heard it, a distinct, mournful howl that sent a chill down my spine. I straightened up, scanning the perimeter of the truck. That's when I saw it. A massive figure standing at the edge of the clearing, partially obscured by the swirling snow. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, a creature that seemed to straddle the line between man and beast, standing on two legs. Its muscular frame was covered in thick, matted fur, blending seamlessly with the snowy landscape. Its eyes glowed an unnatural red, piercing through the darkness with an intensity that made my blood run cold. For a moment, I was frozen, the reality of the situation sinking in. The creature let out another howl, louder and more feral than before, and began to move toward me with a predatory grace. My heart pounded in my chest as adrenaline surged through my veins. I reached for the flashlight in my pocket, the beam cutting through the darkness, but it barely illuminated the creature's menacing form. Without thinking, I sprinted back to the truck, my legs moving on autopilot driven by sheer terror. The howling echoed in my ears, each step the creature took sending shivers down my spine. I fumbled with the keys, my hands trembling as I tried to unlock the door. The creature was gaining on me, its heavy breaths visible in the cold night air. Finally, I managed to get the door open and slammed it shut, locking it with a desperate shove. I leaned against the door, gasping for breath, my mind racing for a way to escape. The howling intensified, now surrounding the truck from all sides, the creature's growls a constant reminder of the imminent danger. I gunned the engine, the truck lurching forward, tires struggling against the deep snow as I sped down the deserted road. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees whipping by in a blur of white and shadow. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the creature chasing me. But there was nothing, just the endless night stretching out before me. My thoughts were a tangled mess of fear and confusion, questioning what I had just witnessed and how it was even possible. I drove for what felt like hours, the storm intensifying with every mile. Snowflakes battered the windshield, obscuring my view and making it nearly impossible to navigate. The roads were treacherous, hidden potholes and ice patches making each turn a potential disaster. My mind replayed the terrifying encounter over and over, the image of the glowing red eyes seared into my memory. By dawn, the storm had subsided, leaving behind a serene but eerie calm. The first rays of sunlight peeked over the horizon, illuminating the snowy landscape in a soft, golden glow. I finally reached the construction site, the familiar buildings a welcome sight after the harrowing night. Exhausted and shaken, I parked the truck and stepped out, the cold still biting at my skin but the immediate threat gone. The next morning, I couldn't shake the memories of the creature. Determined to find answers, I reached out to the local authorities and shared my story. At first, they dismissed it as a case of hypothermia-induced hallucination, a common occurrence among lone travelers in the harsh Alaskan winters. But something about my detailed account made them take a second look. They sent a search party to investigate the area where I had stopped, combing through the dense forest with a mix of skepticism and concern. Days passed with no sign of the creature, the only evidence being a few large, deep scratch marks on the truck's door, just as I had described. The search eventually ended without any concrete findings, leaving me to ponder the mystery on my own. Weeks turned into months, and life slowly returned to normal. The memory of that night faded into the recesses of my mind, overshadowed by the routine of work and daily responsibilities. But every time a howl echoed through the night or a shadow moved just beyond the edge of my vision, I was reminded of the terror that had once gripped me. Years later, I still think about that night, the encounter that defied explanation and challenged everything I thought I knew about the wilderness. The legend of the howling creature in the Alaskan woods grew among the locals, stories shared around campfires and in hushed tones by those who had heard similar tales. Some believed it was a ghostly remnant of past tragedies. Others thought it was a cryptid, a creature born from the darkest corners of the forest. Whatever the truth may be, the experience left an indelible mark on me, a constant reminder of the thin veil between reality and the supernatural. The Alaskan wilderness, with its untamed beauty and hidden dangers, holds secrets that are best left undisturbed, their mysteries preserved beneath layers of snow and time. Sometimes, when the wind howls just right and the night grows cold, I find myself staring into the darkness, wondering if the creature still roams those frozen woods, its glowing eyes forever searching, its howls a haunting echo of the night when fear took hold and the shadows came alive.